in any times of crisis, ambiguity, and uncertainty, he provided clear priorities, and those priorities have been standing since in terms of what the IDF is doing and how we are to allocate our resources. Priority number one is to continue to defend the state of Israel along all of our borders, north, south, east, west, underground, in the air and at sea, and in cyber. We're the only organization that is tasked with doing that, and we understand that if we don't do it, nobody else will. And even though we want to commit many of our resources and capabilities in supporting the national efforts in dealing with the COVID-19, we understand that we have to remain vigilant, and our number one priority remains to continue to defend the borders of the State of Israel. Having said that, I'd like to go into a few examples of what we've done. Excuse me for just a second. Right. And so in terms of the situation globally, I know that many of you are in countries which have been hit worse than Israel has. I'm putting this slide here in terms of the confirmed cases, the deaths, and the positive statistics of the amount of people who have recovered after suffering the disease, just as a perspective. The bottom line from this slide is that Israel so far, and that's the next slide, relatively speaking to the UK and many other Western countries, has so far not been on the higher end of the amount of people that have been affected by the virus. That's of course a very positive sign, and we intend to keep it that way. And the IDF is part of the effort in flattening that curve and keeping the numbers as low as possible through a systemic effort. But this is the most updated data that we have for Israel in terms of the amount of confirmed cases. We unfortunately have more than 111 Israelis who have passed away as a result of COVID-19, almost all of them quite elderly or suffering from previous illnesses. And with regards to the IDF, if we look at the data here, the next slide, is that we have had so far 155 confirmed cases, none, and I emphasize this, none, which is a very important number, in any critical condition. We have more than 30 service members that have recovered fully, and we have approximately a little bit more than 2,000 people, IDF personnel, in quarantine so far. And more than 4,000 IDF soldiers have undergone COVID-19 tests. Some of them, the overwhelming majority, in labs that are conducted inside the IDF. Okay, so that's the figure. And I can say that the number of quarantine personnel in the IDF has gone down. The first days and weeks, we had more than 5,600 IDF personnel quarantined because of quick efforts being done by the IDF to quarantine lots of people with very little room for error. Anybody who had been in contact with anybody who was suffering from the disease was immediately quarantined, and that's why the number has been going down steadily. Every once in a while there is some kind of we see another or additional IDF personnel who contact virus, but bottom line is that this amount is going down, and I'll speak about what we've done so far in order to deal with the situation inside the IDF. Now, I'll divide our efforts into two parts. One, internal, in order to keep the IDF and to maintain our operational capabilities in defending the state of Israel. That's number one. And the second one is how we are supporting national efforts in combating the virus. In terms of what we've been doing in order to support the national efforts to combat the spread of the virus, I'll give a few examples. There are more. If you're interested in other topics, during the Q&A session, we can elaborate about them. As of now, we have more than 12 hotels up and running that are special facilities managed and operated by the Home Front Command for Israeli civilians that are, and the aim of these civilian hotels, the first one was the Dan Panorama Hotel on the beachfront in Tel Aviv, which I'm sure that quite a few of you are familiar with and maybe have even stayed in it. And there are other hotels in Jerusalem, in Tiberias, in the south, and in other parts of Israel. The bottom line is that we have these hotels in order to flatten the curve, assist people who cannot be in quarantine in their homes, and those who are suffering from mild symptoms, instead of being in hospitals and burdening the Israeli healthcare systems, they are in these hotel facilities. We're talking about a few thousand Israeli civilians who have been in these hotel facilities. As we speak, the IDF Home Front Command has now received responsibility to take care of all of the Israeli civilians who come home from abroad, who are going to be in mandatory quarantine for 2 weeks, and they're going to be in these hotel facilities in order to minimize the spread in Israeli society. We're working closely with Magen David Adom, with the Ministry of Health. I'd say that the leading executing force in the IDF in almost all of the efforts supporting national infrastructure here is the Home Front Command, which is the part of the IDF which is tasked in real time with supporting the civilian efforts. That's the same command that is tasked with providing bomb shelters in times of war and engaging with local communities today in support of the fight against the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We have a few different call centers, and you can see pictures here down to the right with President Rivlin. We understand that getting the message out to different segments of the Israeli population was absolutely key, especially in the beginning. So call centers in 4 different languages, or 5, Hebrew, Arabic, Russian, Amharic, and also we've had efforts in French and in English. But the message here, especially early on, was to push information to the Israeli civilians, what to do, what not to do, how to act, how to protect themselves, what the regulations and restrictions were. Absolutely key to get that out. I can say that that was very important in the beginning. We're seeing less and decreasing numbers in terms of Israeli civilians calling those call centers and asking for information. As you know, the IDF is quite a high-tech military. We have different units in the IDF deal with either adapting existing technologies or inventing and using new technologies for military purposes. What we've done is, you can see it here up on the upper right side, is that we have provided with technological units from the Intel as well as from the naval forces, have provided different technological solutions, ventilators, which early on we understood was really a bottleneck in the healthcare system's ability to provide medical care. So ventilators are now produced by elite technological units in the IDF, and overcoming or trying to bridge the gaps that exist, the global gaps that exist in terms of this crucial equipment. And in another type of mission, we're also supporting the Israeli police in implementing curfews and lockdowns in different parts of Israel. Now, this is a different type of mission, not similar to nicer missions of providing assistance to civilians, which I'll speak about in just a second, but we're rather speaking about enforcing. But the important part is that this mission in support of the Israeli police, we are, let's say, second fiddle. The mission is the mission of the Israeli police, and we are in a support facility or support position in order to allow the Israeli police to conduct more missions with more personnel, without us being in the lead of the operation. I'll go on and give a few other examples. We've been assisting local authorities in Israel, distributing food, medicine, and caring for elderly and weaker parts of Israeli population. And at the end, I'll have the amount of tons of food that has been distributed. And I can tell you it is massive amounts of food, especially taking into consideration Pesach holidays and the preparations for it. And I'll speak about Bnei Brak in just a second. And we have also done a dedicated blood drive. You can see the number here. Our target number was 7,000 blood units that we wanted to collect from IDF service members in order to support Israeli hospitals. So far, we have collected a little bit more than 10,000, and the blood drive continues at the order and also the personal example of the Chief of Staff who thought of this idea and is leading it. In terms of these hotel facilities, you can see this is the current population. I can assure you that it will rise. It's important. An important takeaway here is that it's a nationwide spread. As you can see, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, north, south, with adapting the different facilities to the different parts of the population. So we have hotels in the eastern part of Jerusalem that are specially catering for Israeli Arabs. We have a hotel in the north, near Zion, as well as Lavi, Kibbutz Lavi. Dalia, I'm sure you're familiar with the Kibbutz Lavi up in the north, where Karen's adoptive family is. And that's especially catering for religious and Orthodox Jews. And the olive tree in Jerusalem has a lot of Arabs that are housed there and get assistance. We're talking about hundreds of people who are there now, and that number is going to rise. Examples of technology that I spoke about: ventilators and different new equipment that we're basically adjusting or retrofitting in order to meet the needs. Just yesterday, we released that our elite Navy flotilla, Shayetet 13, our equivalent or similar unit like the US Navy SEALs, one of our best units in the IDF, understood the need of providing compressed oxygen both to hospitals and for the elderly at home who use this oxygen. And they yesterday, or they launched it a few days ago, and yesterday we made it public that they're taking the same canisters that serves Navy commandos for their operational missions, and they're providing compressed oxygen for medicinal use for Israeli civilians. All of it based on the understanding that we need to pitch in and to support wherever we can, again, without compromising our combat capabilities and our ability to conduct missions. We've deployed more than 1,400 Israeli soldiers in support of the Israeli police across the country, in different parts of Israel, in different areas. So far, that mission has been quite successful, and we anticipate that this mission will continue as needed, and we stand ready to continue to support it. Now, I know that quite a lot of attention has been focused on Bnei Brak and our support to the local population. Bnei Brak is the city in Israel where there's the highest concentration of confirmed cases of COVID-19. As such, there's been a national effort, an Israeli national effort focused on Bnei Brak, and we've sent one of our most elite divisions, the 98th Division, which is where we have the paratroopers and our commando brigade. They are currently in Bnei Brak. They've been there for more than a week, and you can see that we have distributed more than 100,000 meals to families across the city, including, of course, Pesach, and we're just in the last stages of providing additional meal for second Leila Seder, Chag Sheni, all over the city. I was personally there yesterday, speaking with the local authority and seeing how the paratroopers are organizing it. It's beautiful. There was quite a lot of let's say skepticism and perhaps misunderstandings and fear in the beginning, but so far this mission has been going very well, and the emphasis here is to support local authorities. The IDF hasn't moved in on Bnei Brak, and the IDF isn't in control of Bnei Brak. The local authorities are in control of Bnei Brak. The IDF is in support, distributing food, medicine, and assisting to evacuate the elderly if they need medical assistance. Another example of that we've taken a DNA lab in the IDF that exists in order to, unfortunately, identify the remains of fallen soldiers in combat, which is an important aspect of the IDF in real time. So we've transformed that or adapted that lab so that we can use it as a COVID-19 testing lab. So far, we've done more than 3,000 tests in this, again, out of an effort to alleviate pressure from civilian infrastructure and to make sure that we have our own independent capability to understand if there's a spread of the virus anywhere in the IDF, quickly quarantine so that we can continue and conduct our mission. All of it is according to the standards of the Ministry of Health, and so far working very well. As a reminder, this happened approximately 2 weeks ago. Hezbollah tried to send or dispatched a model airplane across the border, able to intercept it. And this little airplane, which was probably sent for intelligence purposes, is in our possession and has been, of course, analyzed by the intelligence. But it serves as a reminder that we cannot and must not let down our guard in any of the borders. And as you know, on the 28th of, as you know, or maybe you don't know because maybe it didn't get filtered through British media, on the 28th of March, as we were providing assistance to Gaza, which I'll give examples of in just a few minutes, a rocket was fired from Gaza towards Israel. Fortunately, didn't cause any casualties. Now, in terms of Gaza and Judea and Samaria, I'll separate between the two territorial areas, and I'll speak first about what we have been doing with regards to Gaza. Important to emphasize, with regards to Gaza, after all, Gaza is controlled and has been for the last 14 years by an internationally recognized terrorist organization that doesn't recognize the state of Israel and wishes to destroy it. Irregardless, we understand that it is within our interests to stem the spread of the virus in Gaza and to contain the situation and help the local authorities in Gaza from any deterioration of the situation. As such, we assist and facilitate international aid to the Gaza Strip. And there's examples here of the transfer of testing swabs as well as medical equipment, whether it is different types of medicine or personal protective gear or other things that are needed for the efforts inside the Gaza Strip. That continues on a daily basis, together with the hundreds of tons per day that are transferred through Israel to the Gaza Strip. It hasn't stopped even for a single day over the last month. It continues, and I assume that it will continue despite all the difficulties and despite the absurdity of the situation. I can say, and I don't know if you have asked about it or if you're going to ask about it, but yes, the local authorities, Hamas in Gaza, have taken active steps in order to contain the situation. So far, these steps seem to be effective, and we do not see, and we're monitoring that, of course, very closely, that the Palestinian health system in Gaza is anywhere near being overwhelmed by civilians suffering from COVID-19, which is very important. We follow those developments closely. We understand the dangers of the situation here, and it is within our interest to maintain the situation as such. Now, in terms of Judea and Samaria, that's a bit of a different situation. Here, we actively engage with the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority very early on decided to impose a curfew on the local Palestinian population. They are the ones who are enforcing it. We are supporting and enforcing roadblocks, etc., in the areas that are bordering with Jewish communities. But other than that, we conduct joint trainings together with the Palestinian Authority. We have provided tons of medical equipment, personal protective gear, testing equipment, and chemicals for disinfection. And that continues rather well. In the early stages, we also did joint operations in evacuating internationals from Bethlehem and other places so that we could contain the situation together. Overall, I would say, as I near the end of the briefing, that is definitely two geographical areas that we are concerned with, Judea and Samaria and Gaza. We share an interest with the authorities in Gaza and with the Palestinian Authority to contain the situation and limit the spread, and we are acting accordingly. The lead organization on behalf of the Israeli military is COGAT, the Coordinator for Government Activities in the Territories, which is part of the defense establishment, which leads that activity both in facilitating international aid to the Gaza Strip, as well as directly liaising with the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. And if there are questions about it, I'm sure I can elaborate about it future. To bring this to a close, as I said, our number one priority is to defend the borders of the State of Israel in the air, at sea, cyber, underground, and along all of our borders, and to ensure our operational continuity and readiness. And as the Chief of Staff has said officially a few times now, the IDF stands ready to enhance and broaden our support of national efforts in combating the spread of the disease. And I can say that the general vector is a rise in the involvement of the IDF, as ordered by the Security Cabinet, by the government, and in close cooperation with the Ministry of Health and all other relevant authorities within the State of Israel. I'd be more than happy to, and last thing, before we do questions, sorry for the jumping slide here. For those of you who want to be better informed and feel that you're not getting the full story of what's going on, I'd recommend you to visit our website, where we have an updating story of all of the latest facts and figures and data on IDF efforts with regards to Corona. We have our Twitter page, IDF Twitter, it's just @IDF, as well as Facebook. And for anything related to the Palestinians, Judea and Samaria and Gaza, COGAT, the organization that leads the activities that I spoke about, also has a web page and a Twitter handle. And I urge you to follow and to seek the information there. A lot of what we do of what Israel does with regards the assistance that we facilitate or provide to Gaza and Judea and Samaria, respectively, doesn't get a mention in British or European media. And if you want the latest figures to be able to confront any kind of biased reporting or slander, this is where you'll get it, COGAT and the IDF. With that, I'd be more than happy to try to answer questions.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you very much. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. So we've had, I have invited people to ask their questions by posting on the chat. So Jonathan, if you can see there, but first, we had a couple of people post their questions earlier on. So I'm just going to read those out to you now. From Daphne Witztum, she has asked, why are soldiers of very important units having to endanger themselves in helping some of the population who did not keep the social distancing? Do you want me to repeat that?
Well, no, I heard the question.
Great,
I suppose that I suppose that the question is referring to to Bnei Brak and other communities. And, you know, in some ways, sometimes military life is easier because it's very, you know, we get orders and we execute them. That's on the very basic military level. The State of Israel decided that a national effort needs to be done with regards to Bnei Brak as well as Beitar Eilit and Modi'in. I will not go into the aspects of the national information campaign, what was done, what should have been done different. None of my business, and my views aren't relevant there. My business is that once the IDF was ordered, we analyzed the mission, we took it with utmost sincerity. Maybe you can mute everybody except from me. Great, thank you. So we received this mission, analyzed it, prepared for it, and took the necessary steps in order to protect our soldiers in terms of personal protection equipment, masks, gloves, and the visors in different areas that it was needed. And so far, I can say that in terms of contamination, extremely small, limited numbers. I'm talking about less than, you know, dozens of soldiers that are reporting any symptoms. And after all, we execute. The IDF is the people, the military of the State of Israel, of the people of Israel. And when we are given a mission, we don't second guess it. We try to do our best and execute it in the best possible way. And I can tell you personally, after having spoken to quite a lot of the officers from the paratrooper brigade, actually yesterday, we're going to release a movie about it. They were a bit cagey about how this mission would go on, but all of them have lots and lots of positive stories of engagement with Israeli civilians who, for them, it was the first time that they met IDF soldiers and saw them in real life. And very good encounters of happiness and thankfulness. So all in all, that mission is going well. And as I saw and showed in terms of statistics, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of meals that have been delivered to a part of the Israeli population that is really in the need of it. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Jonathan?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, so another question from Helen Friedman. How are the IDF responding to media reporting that suggests Israel is not looking after the Arab Israeli population and also the Palestinian population? I think her question is relating to media reporting here in the UK and potentially, obviously, elsewhere.
Yeah, I spoke a bit about it when I spoke about the efforts that we are undertaking in order to support Judea and Samaria and to facilitate international assistance to the Gaza Strip. So I would categorically say that that is incorrect, and that we are indeed providing and caring for. I can say that today we've also launched an operation to provide food and the basic necessities and medicine to the Muslim population and Arab population in Israel, who are preparing for the Ramadan. Ramadan is in approximately 10 days, and we know that Muslims will be preparing for that holiday, and we have Israeli troops executing similar tasks that we have done in other parts of Israel, providing food and medicine to the elderly and others. That is going on in Muslim communities as well. So categorically, I would reject those claims, and I would say that they are untrue. And anybody who gets those reports should see what we are, the stories that we are, or the information that we are sharing ourselves with examples, pictures, figures, facts and numbers about the amount of food that we have provided, medicine, and the areas in Israel where we are operating, which also include the Arab population.
Okay, thank you. Then another question from Jonathan Hoffman. Has the IDF's commitment to fighting corona affected its operational ability? Has it inadvertently encouraged terrorism?
No. Categorically, again, a short and simple answer is no. If you'd like me to elaborate, I could say that we continue to be vigilant along our borders, and as I showed with this Hezbollah attempt, and we've had a few other small events, overall, the amount and the threat level of the different terrorist organizations along our borders, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others, in general, has decreased a bit. That, of course, does not lead to any complacency on behalf of the IDF, but we do see, and we acknowledge the fact that we see a slightly lower amount of enemy activity, maybe in relation to the COVID-19 and how that has affected Iran, Lebanon, and other areas. So in terms of our capabilities, no, all of our units are at combat strength. There are no units in the IDF that have been affected anywhere near to such an extent that it impedes on their combat capabilities. We do have different units where there's a certain amount of soldiers who are in quarantine as a preventative measure, but none of the units are anywhere in the area of having limited capabilities. Actually, on the contrary, one of the first steps that were taken in the IDF was to say, okay, we want to encapsulate and defend the IDF and kind of distance it from the other parts of Israel. So immediately we sent all of the soldiers and commanders and officers who serve in combat units in what we called closed bases. We sent them to the units, and they have been there now for almost a month in their units in order to minimize the risk of contamination or spread of the virus from civilians to Israeli soldiers, especially those in combat unit. So bottom line is, to answer the question, no, and the level of our combat readiness is normal, and I would even say higher than regular, because we have more soldiers on base than we have in routine times.
Great, thank you. How much more time do you have for questions? Just so that I can get a feel.
Oh, we can go on. Okay, no problem.
Fantastic.
I have more time. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we have another question here from Riva Foreman, just asking, which is the best link or website to share this presentation with others? So yeah, you did mention some sources earlier. If you could just
Yeah, and I think in terms of, you know, we really have our Twitter handle. We really try to have the latest and most updated information immediately shared on Twitter. Anybody who wants to stay updated, this is probably the best platform to do so. And for those of you who want more detail, more facts and figures and information, go to the IDF website. We have a developing story that is updated once or twice per day with all of the latest press releases compiled together, so you can scroll from the beginning of the corona situation in Israel and until now, and see how the situation has unfolded, and that exists on our website, idf.il/en, as in English.
Okay, thank you. Another question here from David Guy. What, if anything, is the IDF policy on releasing sick Palestinian prisoners? I'm assuming that's Palestinian prisoners who are suffering with COVID-19, if any.
Right, so that is less the responsibility of the IDF. Most of that lies with the prison service facilities in Israel. But I can say that I am aware of discussions that have been going on, and there have been, let's say, assessments of that situation. So far, the situation in those prisons is that the very early steps that were taken, the preventive measures of not allowing visitors and strict social distancing inside those prisons, including relocation of inmates and opening new wards and doing many other things in order to lessen the chances of a spread inside the prisons. So far, that seems to have worked, and as of now, I am not aware of any situation of a massive, or at least any spread inside any of those prisons. They are not managed by the IDF, but of course it is related to the topics that we deal with. But to answer the question, such steps have not been taken. I know that things have been discussed, but the Ministry of Internal Security and other responsible authorities decided not to.
Great. Another question here. Apparently, we've heard here that some people are spitting and coughing on soldiers and police in Israel. Can you comment on this?
You know what? I'll deviate from short and very to the point answers in what I usually say as a spokesperson. I'll say that there's been quite a lot of misinformation, and I would say malicious information shared in Israeli media as well as international media. But I think that what the question refers to is our reports in Israeli media of reports like this, or alleged reports like this, of those kinds of encounters. My answer relies on the information available in the IDF and what we've heard from Israeli police. I know of extremely few such events happening. Happened in a few isolated places, and they were dealt with and did not reoccur in any location around Israel, which I think is key. And I think that they were dealt with by the local authorities in those communities. Of course, such events are totally unacceptable, but they definitely, according to events on the ground, do not represent the general atmosphere and are actually contrary to the general atmosphere, which I've personally seen and spoken with many of our IDF soldiers who are on the ground and in daily contact with daily society. They're actually opposite. And what we're seeing is good relations, lots of gratitude, and gratitude to the efforts of the IDF. Like many things, I think it's a bit of sensationalism amplified by media, and based on what I've seen on the ground and the experiences of Israeli soldiers, not at all representative of what's going on, dealt with quickly and has not reoccurred.
Great, good to hear, thank you. Another question, this time from Mark Newman. How do you see the timeline of the exit strategy for COVID-19 in Israel? I'm guessing his question for you is from the perspective of, how do you see the role of the IDF in implementing an exit strategy?
Yeah, so the IDF is, of course, the higher echelons, the chief of staff and the general staff. They're part of the Home Front Command. They're part of the deliberations in that aspect, and there is talk at the government level about formulating an exit strategy, etc. We are more on the executive end of it, more in terms of executing orders and whatever policy is decided by the Israeli government under the lead of the Ministry of Health. Generally, I can say that we assess that this will be a situation that this event will continue to shape reality for the coming foreseeable future, and the IDF is prepared both in terms of manpower, in terms of logistics, capabilities, etc., to continue to support national efforts while maintaining our combat capabilities. There's quite a lot of uncertainty, and as time goes by, of course, we're talking about severe economic consequences that the IDF is also aware of, but nothing that we control. So in short, I can say that the IDF is part of the conversation, ready to execute any plan that the Israeli government decides on, or the ministries decides on, and ready to enhance our involvement and to do more if that is the way that the government decides that we need to go.
Amazing. Okay. Another question here from Stephen Simbler, who asks, and I suspect from an earlier comment you made where you mentioned that you've got a lot more soldiers on the ground. He's asking, has the IDF altered the Miluim program as a result of COVID-19?
Yes, we have. It was decided quite early on not to summon reserve soldiers, Miluim, for different training, different exercises that were slated for the month of the last part of March and the early month of April. Not a lot was planned because of Pesach and holidays, etc. So that was the immediate decision. We have changed the general, let's say, program, our yearly program of the rotation of battalions and our training activity, including the reserve units. And we are deliberating how to continue with that and how to adjust to the situation. On one hand, maintaining and implementing social distancing and minimizing the risk of large numbers of civilians, reservists, coming into the IDF, perhaps and contaminating the IDF with COVID-19. That's on one hand. But then on the other hand, knowing very well that in order to stay combat ready and fit, we have to continue to conduct exercises and training. So that is being deliberated. Those are the two things considered. And the summoning of reserve personnel has been adjusted accordingly. Overall, for, let's say, day-to-day purposes, a very minimal amount of external personnel, reservists and others, are allowed into the IDF, again, in order to minimize the risk of contamination inside the IDF.
Okay, thank you. Another question here, again from Mark Newman. How do you see the importance of soft power and humanitarian aid by some of the IDF agencies in supporting the state of Israel?
Well, I think that they are absolutely crucial to our international legitimacy. And I think that the work of COGAT specifically here is excellent. And they are working in very adverse conditions. On one hand, facilitating aid to Gaza, which is ruled by an organization that tries to destroy the state of Israel. And on the other hand, providing and working with the Palestinian Authority, which is of course much better, but still has its challenges. I think those efforts are very important and they are done with the utmost sincerity. Lots of manpower and energy and resources are allocated for that. And I can say that in terms of internally towards the Israeli society, so far this has been, I think, a very good opportunity to see many parts of Israeli society and the IDF at its finest, providing aid to Bnei Brak, a segment of Israeli population that doesn't come into daily contact with the IDF and is not connected to mainstream Israel, we could put it like that, having the situation of Corona and COVID-19 as a kind of a bridge for the IDF to reach out and to provide assistance, has brought a lot of positive developments that I'm sure we'll be able to deepen and widen in the future. It's still too early to say what the bottom line of this will be. But overall, these soft power efforts, reaching out, supporting, providing food, medicine, blood, hotels, healthcare, etc., are very good and important. And that's part of what the IDF needs to be able to do and is currently doing.
Okay, thank you. And here's a question from someone on Facebook who's been watching. What is your response to the EU's recent pledging to give 71 million euros to the Palestinian Authority to assist the fight of coronavirus? Is it likely to get to the people who need it?
Well, that's getting a little bit into politics, which I usually try to stay clear of. I found that to be a good way of keeping my job, which I like very much. And so what I'll respond to that is that assisting the Palestinian Authority as well as the civilian population in Gaza, despite the fact that the civilian population in Gaza is ruled by a ruthless extremist terrorist organization, but providing aid now in the time of COVID-19 is important. And as I said before, COGAT is facilitating the provision of international aid to Gaza. So I don't know about numbers, and I don't know about how much of that will go through. What I hope is that different efforts and statements that we've seen in various Palestinian outlets of misinformation, slander, and unbiased biased fake news against Israel and against the IDF, those efforts should definitely stop. And from my perspective, from the IDF perspective, I think that it's very important that everybody focus on the task at hand, which is to stem the spread of the virus, treat those that are infected, and make sure that we can go back to routine activity as soon as possible. And with regards to what the Palestinian Authority does with money, I won't go into that, but I'm sure that if you ask perhaps a spokesperson, perhaps the Prime Minister's office or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they can give you another perspective on that.
Okay, thank you. There's another question here from David Klein. Again, I'm not sure that this fits your remit. We have read of reports that Mossad got hold of testing kits and other protective equipment. Can you offer a comment on this at all?
I won't go into what the Mossad does and does not do. Not my organization to represent. I can say, however, that the Ministry of Defense and in some parts also IDF personnel have been involved in efforts, totally kosher and above board, efforts around the world to procure different medical equipment needed, whether it is testing swabs, personal protection gear, chemicals, medicine, ventilators, and other things around the world in order to supply the Israeli civilian population. This has been done. Nothing heroic beyond enemy lines and spy activities by the IDF, but using existing lines of procurement, usually used in order to buy military supplies, weaponry, ammunition, etc. But now using those existing lines of contact and communication and logistics supply lines to buy what's needed today. And that is the list of goods that I stipulated. So that has happened. With regards to the Mossad, I wouldn't be able to verify what they have and what they have not done.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's a couple of other questions, but really you seem to have answered them previously. So unless anyone has any other questions, I think we'll draw this fascinating insight to a close. Hold on, there's lots of thank yous coming through, Jonathan. So, on behalf of the Zionist Federation and the WZO, the World Zionist Organization, sincere thanks to you for giving up your evening to brief us. Thank you very much.
My absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you. It's great that you organized it, and I do hope that everybody who listened and took their valuable time to listen to what we had to say, link up, seek the information, and share it with your politicians, with your members of parliament, with your community, and with anybody who has other points of view. It's important to get the truth out, and we do our best to get that information out. And I really thank the Zionist Federation and everybody else who was involved in organizing in this opportunity to get our voice out. So thank you very much. Shalom, and I do wish you the best of luck in dealing with the situation back home as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Pesach Sameach and happy Easter to everyone. Thank you.
Pesach Sameach and happy Easter, indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.